You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome to the Radiance Films Podcast, a fan podcast dedicated to all things Radiance Films. I'm your host, Adam Lundy, back again after a year's hiatus, once again to talk about Radiance and everything related to it. I suppose just to kind of start off this episode for people who are maybe returning after the year's break, or even just people who stumble across this and have never listened to the podcast before, I thought I'd give just a quick reminder and a quick rundown on what I do here on this podcast and what the plans are for the kind of coming year. First of all, as everything implies, this is a podcast all about Radiance Films. The way I'd been running things prior to my hiatus was I was doing two types of episodes. The first was announcement/reaction episodes where I would either myself or usually with a guest, I would kind of discuss the films that had come out that month alongside the films that were also announced that month for future sale. Those were the typical monthly episodes. And then I'd also sporadically done what I kind of termed vault episodes, where myself and a guest would dive back into the Radiance archive from before I started doing this podcast to talk about a film or a box set or whatever it may be that was kind of released prior to this podcast existing. So kind of delving into the vault, as they'd say. The plan then for this coming year is pretty similar. We're going to be doing monthly reactions to the films that come out and the films that get announced. And then I will also aim to try and get vault episodes out that will, again, cover stuff that came out before the podcast, and then also stuff that just came out during 2025 that I didn't get to react to due to the hiatus that I was under. So what we're going to do this episode, it is just me, myself and I, no guest this week. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to kind of do a mini 2025 retroactive. I'm not going to go through every film that came out in 2025 and give my thoughts on every single one. I'm just going to go through what were my own personal highlights, my favorite releases, the favorite films that I kind of watched and discovered last year that Radiance were putting out. And then what I'll do is we'll do a quick look over the stuff that was announced at the start of January. So just for context, I'm recording this on the 30th of January, so we're about a week and a half away from the February announcements. So the aim will be to cover what came out in 2025, or my highlights of 2025. I'm going to talk a little bit about the stuff that got announced at the start of January. That'll be coming out in a few months' time. And then when I come back in February, I'm going to talk about the films that came out in January, so the films that are shipping currently, and also whatever gets announced on February 11th, if I remember correctly, is the next announcement date. So expect an episode kind of within a few days of that next time out. I do also have my first vault episode planned. It's going to be a pretty big one because, as I'll kind of talk about, one of the biggest releases that Radiance put out last year, and arguably the biggest release in the label's history, is the Radical Japan set featuring the films of Nagisa Oshima. So I'm going to be doing a vault episode on that in the coming weeks. I'll say, hopefully, it could be a little bit longer. Have the guest already lined up. Just need to get things scheduled there on that front. And I suppose while I'm talking on the topic of guests, I kind of want to set some expectations with the podcast. And this may not sit well with everybody, because I'm sure a lot of you tuned in not to listen to me, but to listen to the very interesting person who I often had beside me. Guests are not going to be as frequent this year. If I can be completely kind of open with the kind of community here, a lot of things contributed to the hiatus, but one of the big things that contributed to the hiatus was I put myself under a lot of stress trying to get guests that I thought were interesting and would bring great context to what we were talking about and would bring a wealth of knowledge to what we were talking about, rather than just trying to pluck from other podcasters and people that I'm friends with and already know. I really went out of my way to try and get experts. I suppose that kind of the best example of that was when I had Kim Newman on, which again, I said it at the time, and it's still crazy thinking about it now. To have someone like Kim Newman on a very new podcast was incredible. I'll remember it forever. But I put myself under a lot of stress to get guests lined up for episodes that obviously have never came out in the end. And that's what kind of led to a lot of the burnout very quickly. So I'm going to not put myself under that stress. I'm still going to aim to have guests, of course. Guests, at the end of the day, there's a reason why these people are experts and I'm not. So it's, having people come in and give their expertise and their knowledge and their context is always interesting, not just for listeners, but even just for myself. I find that engaging. Both as a host and as a listener. So I'm still going to try and get guests, but I wouldn't be expecting a guest every week is the kind of expectation that I'll set here. Right. Well, look, that's all the kind of cleaning up, the kind of opening business sorted. Let's jump now into kind of a greatest hits highlight reel, my favorites of 2025. So jumping into the 2025 retrospective, the first three films that I'm going to talk about, they're kind of came out in the first couple of months of the year. One of them, actually, to be honest, all three of them were a bit of a surprise in terms of how much I enjoyed them, mainly because one of them is not really in a genre that I enjoy. One of them is not really a director that I have a particular fondness for. And one was a film I had just never heard of. So the fact that all three, ended up being some of my favorites of the year is quite special. The first one that I'm going to talk a little bit about is Underworld Beauty from Seijun Suzuki. So Suzuki is a bit of an interesting filmmaker. I don't particularly love his films. I haven't seen a ton of them. I've seen the kind of big hits, but he's never a filmmaker that I've fallen in love with in the same way that I have with other kind of Japanese new wave directors that I really like Oshima or like Shinoda. I never really got the love for Suzuki. Well, I didn't get the love for Suzuki, but I personally never fell in love with Suzuki's films. So I went in with this with kind of muted expectations. It seemed like a kind of a cool noir film. And that's exactly what it is. I was worried it was going to have a bit of the pretension that seeps into his later work. But Underworld Beauty, it is, if you're into film noir, this is just a great little film noir. It's very cool. The cinematography is excellent. And we have a couple of really great lead performances as well. This film, this release, I should say, does also include another film, a kind of a shorter film, called Love Letter, that, to be honest, I haven't watched yet. It's only 40 minutes long, but I just haven't gotten around to watching it. But all in all, this was a really good release. I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed Underworld Beauty. The next one is also from a Japanese filmmaker that I just I was never able to fall in love with, and it's a genre that I've always struggled with, and that is Hokuriku Proxy War. Which is by Fukasaku. It's Kinji Fukasaku, and the Yakuza genre in general is just it's one that I've always struggled with. Everything moves so quickly, and I don't have the historical context for a lot of what's happening, which a lot of stuff in the Yakuza films, especially Fukasaku films, it's just him. He makes his films with the idea that you just understand what's happening from a contextual point of view, which can make it sometimes really hard to follow. But what Hokuriku Proxy War brought was it's still a Yakuza film, and some of it is still very hard to follow, I'm not going to lie. However, it's a really beautiful film. It's set up in this kind of snowy region of Japan. So the cinematography is amazing, and then some of the scenes are just so shocking. There's just it will be like a normal Yakuza crime film, and then out of nowhere it will just hit you with just a scene that just makes you go, whoa, how did he get away with this? There's some really rough stuff in here, but this is probably my favorite Yakuza film that I've seen. I haven't seen many just because the ones I have seen I've never really endeared themselves to me. But this is definitely the best Yakuza film I've seen. If you have any recommendations for others, I'm going to be posting obviously stuff on Blue Sky like I used to be. So if you're on Blue Sky, come and interact with the post about this episode, and tell me if there's other Yakuza films I should be watching. I've seen the kind of big ones, and I've obviously seen the ones that Radiance have put out. So come and tell me if I'm just doing things wrong when it comes to Yakuza films. But if there's more out there like Hokuriku Proxy War, then definitely tell me, because this one was really enjoyable. And then in terms of the early slate, the film that really blew me away the most in this early part of the release cycle was a film called The Cat, which was a film I'd never heard of before. It's by a German filmmaker called Dominik Graf. And this is one of my favorite releases in all of 2025. This is probably like a top 3 release, film at least for me. The special features and stuff are good, but the actual film itself, this is probably top 3 for 2025 for me. This is just a perfect slow burn, tense heist film. The lead performance of the kind of mastermind kind of criminal who's hiding in the shadows, guiding everything, is a guy called Goetz George, and he is just phenomenal in this film. He's just this sweaty, mustachioed guy, cool as ice, just hanging out, being just a criminal mastermind. It's a really fantastic film. If you're anyway interested in heist films, crime films that are a bit more slow burn rather than all action, then this is the film for you. I'm honestly shocked. Like, this came out in 1988, so there's obviously not a ton of room. There's, stuff like this can still happen. But I'm shocked that this was never like remade by someone like Michael Mann, because this has all the kind of Michael Mann stuff all over it as well, in terms of that kind of 80s slow burn, character driven crime film. Something like Heat without the intense action scenes, but it's very character driven, very story driven, very slow burn. Even though it doesn't take long to get into the act, like the film basically starts the night before the heist and kicks in straight away. So it's not like there's a ton of like character building stuff happening before and after the heist takes place. It's all happening over the course of this day where the heist is happening. It's a really fantastic film. I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of Dominik Graf, but it blew me away. Like I said, one of my favorite releases of 2025. Up until I saw a couple of more later in the year, this was my favorite of the year so far. Moving then up the way, just to kind of touch on a few of the kind of notable releases. One of the big ones that got a lot of buzz when it was announced was the Patrick Tam double feature, Nomad and My Heart Is That Eternal Rose. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't love these. I was actually a little bit disappointed by them. I'm not super familiar with that very specific genre that I can't quite remember the name of. Bloody Revenge or Bloody Poetry or something along those lines. I definitely preferred My Heart Is That Eternal Rose. That was definitely a bit more in my wheelhouse. Nomad was very tonally incoherent to me. It's like a very normal kind of coming of age film for the majority, and then the last of it just turns into a wacky action film. It wasn't my cup of tea. My Heart Is That Eternal Rose, I definitely enjoyed a little bit more, but it unfortunately didn't blow me away. Another kind of set that got a lot of buzz when it came out was the Hard Boiled set, the 3 thrillers by Alain Corneau, who's a French filmmaker. I really enjoyed this set. I enjoyed 2 out of the 3 films. So my favorite one was the film Série Noire, which stars a guy called Patrick Devere, and he just puts in like a masterclass performance of the just most pathetic dude you could imagine possible. The film is kind of like a weird mashup of like a Scorsese, Paul Schrader style New Hollywood film, but also like with some sprinklings of like Dostoevsky. Like the main character feels like he could be out of a Dostoevsky novel who's been thrown into a Scorsese film, like a 70s gritty crime film. Really great film. Like I said, an amazing kind of lead performance by Patrick Devere. Very much recommend that one. If you're only going to watch one of the films out of the set, that's the one I would recommend. The next one that I liked was Police Python 357, which stars Yves Montand, which is one of the two films in the set that stars Yves Montand. This one was really good as well. Again, another kind of like a play on a 70s police thriller. This one's definitely a bit more kind of a bit stranger in that some of it's almost kind of Giallo-esque as well. It's almost like a mix of like Dirty Harry and a Giallo film, the way the kind of mystery plays out and the main character is kind of having to clean up his tracks and stuff like that. It's a really crazy film, to be honest. It's a little bit too long. It's in or around or maybe just over 2 hours long. So it's a bit long for what it is. It could definitely be cleaned up a little bit. But once the actual main plot kicks in, which is about kind of 20 or so minutes in, then it's just non-stop until the end. So Police Python 357 was one I really enjoyed as well. The last film that said, unfortunately, I didn't enjoy is Choice of Arms. Again, stars Yves Montand and also Catherine Deneuve. They put in good performances, and the film is absolutely, the film's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, for the most part. But it just wasn't my cup of tea. It was very slow. Wasn't a ton of action. The character work is good, especially Montand is good in the role. But yeah, it was just a bit too slow for me. I couldn't really get into it. The pacing was a big problem. And then sort of alongside those releases, another one that I enjoyed was Je t'aime, which is the film by Alain Resnais. Kind of like a time travel film, but like it's very artistic. The editing in this film, like all Resnais films, the editing in this film is what really makes it. It's essentially just about a guy kind of deconstructing his marriage to try and figure out where things went wrong between him and his wife. It's a noted influence on Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind and kind of films of that ilk. But it's a mesmerizing film just in how it's constructed and how it deconstructs itself as it goes on. It's a little bit heady. It's a Resnais film, so it's going to be a little bit heady, but I don't think it's as hard as something as Last Year Marienbad, which, to be honest, I don't think is that hard in general, in that I think both this film and Last Year Marienbad are kind of films you can just put on and let them wash over you. You don't really have to try too hard to figure stuff out, because it's more about the experience and how he's shooting and constructing the film. So Je t'aime, that was a big highlight for me as well. Moving up into kind of future releases then along the year, one that surprised me that I liked it so much was the Jacques Rivette film Va Savoir. Only because I haven't gotten too big into Rivette's back catalogue. I'm not gonna lie, I'm just intimidated by the sheer length of some of his films. So the idea of watching a 2.5 hour film that was kind of posed as a romantic comedy was like, no, this is not really going to be for me. I'm not looking forward to this. But I was really pleasantly surprised. It's such a charming little film. All the kind of ensemble are just really good in their roles. They each play kind of different tropes, I guess. And they're all really good. There's fun little kind of subplots happening that kind of keep the pace going. So even though it's the theatrical cut is like 2.5 hours long, and the director's cut is like 3.5 hours long that I haven't watched yet, but I'm not scared to watch the director's cut, even though knowing it's an extra hour, because I kind of just want to see what else these characters get up to, because they're really interesting. And the film also is just really good looking. The cinematography and the direction by Rivette, you know, he shows why he's a master at his craft. It's a really good looking film. But like I said, I was surprised by the pacing of this. If you're put off by the runtime like I initially was, honestly, it went so much faster than I anticipated it would. I would really recommend checking out Vassavois. The next one up that really kind of jumped out at me was a film called The Rapacious Jailbreaker, which is by a filmmaker called Sadao Nakajima. Never heard of that filmmaker, never heard of this film. And it's a really wild watch. So this film will be like, so it's about this guy, as the title implies. It's about a guy who he's a criminal, he's a bit of a loose cannon, and he repeatedly just finds ways of breaking out of prison. And for like 90% of this film, you know, it'll be just like a completely normal prison drama, and then the other 10% is just the most out of pocket shit you've ever seen in a movie. Just like the most wildest scene, just out of nowhere, that will be like 20 seconds long, and then it will just go back to normal, and you're just like sitting there like, did that just happen? So it's a really engaging film. The lead character, who's played by Hiroki Matsukata, he's really engaging in the lead role. He doesn't play a nice character. His character is not someone you root for, but he's just really engaging. He just chews scenery for the entire film. That was another one that was a bit, that I was surprised by how much I liked it. Just because I knew nothing about it. The synopsis kind of, I was like, okay, yeah, sounds fine, whatever. But the film, it's just really fun. And like I said, the random crazy scenes that crop up will just throw you through a loop. Moving up the way, I'll just speak really briefly on Palindromes, just because it was a big release, because it's Tal Salantz, and obviously he has a cult following. I was surprised that I liked it as much as I did. I'll just kind of put it at that. When it was announced, I was like, oh geez, I don't know if I'm gonna enjoy this or if I'm even gonna watch it. Just because the kind of content that he covers in his films typically are not really, they're just not really for me. I know they have their fans, and there's nothing wrong with what he does as a filmmaker. But yeah, not really for me. But Palindromes, maybe I'm a bad person, but I actually thought it was just a really funny film. Even though there's some really dark stuff throughout the whole film, I just thought it was really funny. Which I suppose that's his niche at the end of the day, is trying to find comedy in the darkest places you can go. And he does it well here in Palindromes. World Noir 3. So World Noir 3 is an interesting box set, because it has a film that I kind of liked, and I liked it more when I thought about it more, and a film I really didn't like, and then a film that I really did like. So just kind of going through each title. So Not Guilty is the one I really like. This is a Michel Simon kind of vehicle, where he plays this doctor who gets away with a murder and then realizes that he can do away with all of his rivals, and he's just too smart for everyone else around him. So it's kind of like, and he like keeps involving himself and keeps dropping clues that it's him, and he still can't believe that like nobody's picking up that, you know, he's the killer. And it's just a great lead performance by Michel Simon, because he's a bad person, but he has that charm about him that you still kind of root for him. You kind of hope he gets away with it. So that one I really enjoyed. It's a really great French noir. The one I didn't enjoy was The Lost One, which was the Peter Lorre kind of writing, directing, starring, producing film, and it was just an absolute bore to sit through. And that was the one I was most excited for, so that was really disappointing, because Peter Lorre is obviously fantastic. So, you know, for this to be a real wet blanket of a film was very disappointing. And then Girl with Hyacinths, which at the moment I think is streaming on the Criterion channel, for those who don't have this set, maybe want to check out this film. I watched it, and I was like, the whole way through I was like, yeah, this is fine. And then it has a kind of like a twist at the end that had me questioning if I'd been watching the rest of the film correctly. And I still need to go back and rewatch it, knowing what the twist is, to see how well telegraphed it is. But people who are familiar with Girl with Hyacinths and its kind of context will speak very highly of this. It's something I need to watch again to really know my full thoughts now that I kind of know what the film is really about. And this is, trying to not get into spoilers here. Right, the next film I'm going to talk about, this is my favorite film from the 2025 releases. And it surprised me because this was my least anticipated film. I was dreading watching it. I put off watching it for as long as possible because I was just like, this is just not going to be for me. Because the kind of artwork looks really trashy. It sounds really trashy, like, it sounds like something like, it just didn't seem like my cup of tea, right? So you'll know what I mean when I tell you the name of the film. So it's Rosa La Rose Filet Public. So it's the film about the sex worker, and the artwork used, which is like the original poster, just makes it look like this really kind of just like this really trashy kind of almost like a soft core film. But this is a beautiful film. And I was so, like, I knew within 5 minutes how wrong I was to judge this film by the cover and by the synopsis. Because pretty much immediately from the get-go, the filmmaker Paul Vecchiali, he can move his camera as well as Max Ophuls could. The way he directs this film, the cast of characters led by Marianne Bassler, who plays Rosa, the kind of streetwalker in who leads the film, is just incredible. I was blown away by this film, by how good it is. It's, like I said, it's shot like a classic Max Ophuls film. It has the feel and scope of a Shakespearean comedy. It almost feels like a play because they have these side characters who play like older prostitutes who come in and kind of comment on what's going on, similar to how you would have in a Shakespeare play, where you'd have these almost like comic relief characters just kind of talk aside, to give information to the audience. They have that in this film as well. It's like if you're like me and was maybe put off, and I know I'm not the only one, because I talked to people in my Discord who were like, oh, this film seems kind of horny, I don't know if I'll bother with it. And I'm like, no, I thought that too, and I'm blown away. So the title of my favorite film that Radiance put out in 2025 is Rosa La Rose Filet Public, and I could not be more shocked than anyone with that being my favorite film of 2025. I've made it my mission this year to make sure that more people see this film, because it is incredible, and I'm so glad that Radiance took a chance and put it out. And and when I say took a chance, I mean took a chance on people, snobs like me, maybe looking it over, but they put it out. They played the long game with me anyway, and I'm so glad I forced myself to watch it because, like I said, it's just an incredible film. Throughout the year, Radiance also put out a couple of films by Luchino Visconti. So they put out La Terra Trema, they put out Senso, and Le Notte Bianche. My Italian's not up to scratch, unfortunately. My favorite of the three was the last one, Le Notte Bianche, the one that stars Marcello Mastroianni as this kind of lovesick guy who slowly starts falling in love with this girl who's waiting for her lover. It's a really sweet film, but what really stood out for me is just it has the most incredible set design, because Visconti, from what I read, essentially built an entire town to shoot this in, and it's so stunning to look at because it's so obviously a fake town. It kind of reminds me a bit of Panique, the French noir, in that it's very obvious the town is fake because it's built to look good on camera, but it also just feels so real at the same time. It just really, when you're watching it, it feels like a dream. So that was definitely my favorite of the Visconti films that came out this year. I know Senso obviously has its love. Senso itself, just as an announcement, was a big one because it's a big film. But Le Notte Bianche or Bianche, whatever way you pronounce it, that's my favorite. in terms of other favorites, there's a samurai film by Tezuka Tanaka, who has a couple of films in the later Dai Gothic box set. But his film is called The Betrayal. And this is another really, really good film. The action in this, so there's a massive kind of fight scene at the end of this film that kind of closes it out. And it might be the best fight scene I've ever seen. I know that's potentially up for debate, because obviously you have, Akira Kurosawa, stuff in Harakiri, you have even things like Kill Bill. But the fight scene in this that closes it out is incredible. It's just so well choreographed, and what makes it great as well is how much it's built up throughout the film. So it's really elegant. It's a pretty emotionally brutal film. It almost has like a film noir fatalism to it, but also with really great cinematography. So The Betrayal was one that surprised me. Again, I was expecting just kind of a run-of-the-mill samurai film, but this one was really very, very good. So I would recommend checking that one out if samurai stuff is up your street. I suppose it'd be remiss to not talk about the two Kumail releases, Daughters of Darkness and Malpertius, or Malpertway. Daughters of Darkness, this is probably, alongside the Oshima set, this was probably their biggest announcement of the year. It's a cult classic for very good reason. It's a beloved Euro horror. Getting this put out in a beautiful 4K release with all those extras in this lovely kind of boxed release. Horror fans across the globe, I'm sure, were rejoicing. I definitely was when it was announced. It was one of the ones that at the start of 2025, when they announced their hints and their kind of map with all the kind of letter hints on it, that I had kind of earmarked to say Daughters of Darkness sounds probably like it's going to come out. So when it was finally announced, not only was I vindicated, I was also just very happy about it. So that's obviously a big one as well. I mentioned Diagothic Volume 2 came out. Didn't enjoy it as much as Volume 1, to be completely honest. I thought the Au revoir films included were a little bit weaker, especially because there's one film in here that's not really even a horror or a gothic film. It just kind of has ghosts and stuff that are more implied, kind of hiding in shadows. It's more of just a standard melodrama. So a little bit disappointed, I guess, in the Diagothic set part 2. And then kind of moving then towards the end of the year, of course, the Radical Japan set that I've already kind of talked about, and I'm going to be getting more into in a future episode. Le Notte Bianche, which I already talked about as well. But another kind of set that came out that just want to highlight, Wicked Games, the 3 films by Robert Hossein. This was a really good set. Kind of similar to the Hard Boiled ones. There's like 2 films that I really liked and then one that I didn't like so much. But the 2 that are really good and they're worth the price of the box set alone, even if I didn't care too much about the third one. So the best one, the best film in the set, in my opinion, is Nude in a White Car, which is kind of like a Hitchcockian film, where Robert Hossein, who obviously stars in the film as well, has a tryst with a blonde woman in a car in the darkness. He doesn't get a good look at her, and he tries to track her down, and it leads him to a house where there's 2 sisters that look very similar. One swears that she wasn't out that night, and the other's in a wheelchair. So it just kind of plays out like this weird mix of like Hitchcock, but with some like Buñuel psychosexual stuff as well. That was a really good film. That was my favorite one in the set. And the other one that I enjoyed a lot was the Western in there called The Taste of Violence. Story wise, like, it's pretty standard, but it looks stunning. The black and white kind of cinematography was just really well done, and the kind of the masters of all of these, in terms of like how they were remastered, like, look really good. They're all really crisp. Then the other film in the set is a film called The Wicked Go to Hell, which I didn't enjoy as much, to be honest. It was kind of like 50-50 of a prison drama and then like a kind of like an escapee, kind of stuck out in the wilderness with a hostage kind of a film, and it didn't merge very well. It's kind of like he had two different ideas like put together. So yeah, The Wicked Go to Hell wasn't one I particularly enjoyed, but the other two films are both fantastic. So if I'm being honest, like unless these come out in the future as single releases, I would recommend picking up the set just for those first two films. And then the only other thing really to talk about for 2025, away from the kind of mainline Radiance stuff in itself, was the announcement of Transmissions, so a kind of Radiance imprint label, sub-label, whatever you want to call it. And this is kind of different from other sub-labels that Radiance have stocked, because obviously they've had Raro, they've had Grindhouse, they've had, what else, Fun City Editions. They've had stuff over the years where they've sold other companies' stock, usually because, you know, they were a kind of a smaller company, an imprint label, and it was just easier to sell through Radiance and try and set up their own storefront. But Transmission is different in that it is ran by the Radiance team, so I would anticipate this one to be a much more long-running series compared to those other ones that have been kind of hit and miss and kind of just disappeared over time. And the first Transmission film that came out is a film called Night of the Juggler, which was put out in a really lovely 4K. And this film is insane. If you've gotten a chance to watch it, or if you're maybe humming and hawing, if you're just into just like films that grab you by the throat and don't let you go for the entirety, then Night of the Juggler is the film for you. This one came out in December, and it's really fantastic. I'd never heard of it before, but it has a really good cast, and the direction is great as well. So Night of the Juggler was the first Transmission release. There's been a few more announced that are going to be coming out throughout this year. So there's 3 more that are coming out. One is called The Stuntman, one is called Special Effects, and the other is called Highway to Hell. Those are the ones that have been announced so far. It seems like they're kicking it up, that they're going to release one every month, so far at least. Whether that continues, I guess we'll find out in a week or so when the February announcements get put up. We'll see if that continues to be a trend. It'll be interesting to know, what they're gonna dive into and what they're gonna pull from for these films, because Transmission, from the kind of mission statement and the post they put out, this is more going to be focused on cult films, especially stuff that's more kind of exploitation adjacent, kind of crime films, action films, horror stuff that maybe doesn't quite fit the Radiance label, which, I would argue a little bit. There's been some pulpy stuff put out by Radiance, but maybe that's the direction they're looking to kind of have that split, kind of like the way when Fran was over in Arrow, the way they had that Arrow Video and the Arrow Academy kind of split between the more art house stuff and the more grindhouse stuff. Maybe this is their idea for this as well, to have Transmission just be for the more grindhouse oriented stuff, which I don't mind. It's cool to have these these different labels to collect. Whether I'm going to be a full collector of Transmission, it remains to be seen. Obviously I own Night of the Juggler. The Stuntman I have that ordered. I'll be ordering special features. Highway to Hell is the one that has me on the fence as to whether or not I'm going to be a completionist for Transmission. I'm still deciding on whether I'm going to order that one, because it doesn't immediately jump out at me. I have had some people tell me it's really fun, but I suppose I should trust my gut in that I should just do it anyway, because there's been a lot of Radiance films that I watched this year that I didn't anticipate liking that I ended up loving. So maybe I should just continue taking that plunge. Now, before we wrap things up then for this episode, I'm just going to do a quick rundown on basically everything that's been announced for 2025 so far. Not going to do a deep dive because, of course, I haven't seen any of these movies that have been announced. So I'm not going to be doing a deep dive on them or anything like that. So I am just going to quickly run through what we have coming up. So in terms of what's going to be featured on the next episode, so the films that are coming out, that are shipping at the moment, some people may have already received them. We have Illustrious Corpses, we have Blood of Revenge, another Taikedo film, and we have The Wild Child, which is another Truffaut film. So we're getting some return return players in the Radiance au revoir in Truffaut and Kato. So those will be the three films I'm going to cover in the next episode in a bit more depth. Then in February, we have Libido. We have Iphigenia. I might have pronounced that very poorly. And then we have the Japanese Godfather trilogy. And then also the transmission release of The Stuntman, which I will talk about. Any of these transmission films that I do end up picking up, I will talk about them. In March, we have what was a very big announcement of the Underworld Chronicles 3 Yakuza Fables by Takashi Miike. This was obviously a really big announcement. Takashi Miike, another filmmaker that I've never really gotten into, but you know, this set hopefully will help me along that path. So the three films in this is Fudo, The New Generation, Agitator, and Deadly Outlaw Rekka. All really cool names for films I've never seen or heard of before, so looking forward to diving into that set just to see what it's about. Also in March is Cutter's Way, which interestingly is the second time Radiance have had Cutter's Way for sale on their website, because this was one of the films that was by a hosted label when Radiance kind of first came out. I can't even remember the name of the hosted label that did it. I'm just going to double check, because I think they still have a standard edition available from when this came out. Can't find it now. I don't think it might have been Fun City Editions, but I don't think it was. But Radiance have their own release of Cutter's Way in 4K coming out, so that's exciting. There's a Polish film called The Dancing Hawk, which I'd never heard of before, but it sounds very interesting. And then we have a Larry Cohen film under the Transmission imprint called Special Effects, which I am really looking forward to, purely because I saw someone mention that it was kind of like a really sleazy version of Vertigo. So I'm always up for anything Vertigo adjacent. And then coming up in April, then we have, from a mainline Radiance point of view, we have Confessions of a Police Captain, which is another Damiano Damiani film, so he's again returning to the Radiance back catalogue. We have a Pedro Almodovar film called Matador, so the first Almodovar film to come to Radiance. We have a Johnny To film called Romancing in Thin Air, which from what I'm reading is not an action film, which surprised me greatly. And then we have a really cool box set called Time to Play, which is films by Jacques Rosier, kind of like an unsung hero of the French New Wave. I've never seen any of his films, so I'm really looking forward to that box set. It looks beautiful. The artwork on it is stunning. And then, as previously mentioned, Highway to Hell is the transmission release for April, which I'm not going to lie, I'm probably going to end up getting it anyway, so we'll see how things go from there. So just to recap things then, so what we're going to be covering next time out. So the announcements are on the 11th of February. By then, all of the January releases should have arrived and I should have watched them. So next episode, I'm going to be coming back to talk about whatever gets announced on the 11th of February and then all the films that have come out this month. I'm not going to have a guest for that. It will just be myself. And then I'm hoping to do that Oshima episode sometime later on in February, potentially early March, but I'm hoping to get it out as soon as possible, and I will have a guest for that. So look, if you're listening, thank you for coming back. If you're a returner, if you're brand new here, I hope you enjoyed. You can follow me over on Blue Sky if you're on Blue Sky, because fuck X and fuck Elon Musk and everyone involved in the fascism going on in the United States at the moment. So you can follow me on Blue Sky. Links are in the description. If you want to come engage with me there, I'm going to be posting up regularly. So please do that. So I'm going to wrap things up here, guys. It's been weird getting used to this format, so things might be a little bit hinky for a couple of episodes while I get back in the driver's seat. And that's it. Hope you all enjoyed.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the 3 hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster, you know, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.